Hey there, all you beautiful Broadway babies. Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Benani, and the other day I had the immense pleasure and honor to sit down with one of the hardest working men in the Broadway history game, Robert W. Schneider. Rob is an author with the book 50 Key Stage Musicals, a concert producer at 54 Below, the artistic director and co-founder of the wonderful J2 Spotlight Theater Company, a great theater company with a mission similar to Encore's, and he's a prolific podcaster with 5 podcast series under his belt, including the hugely popular Behind the Curtain, Broadway's Living Legends podcast, along with Kevin David Thomas, and his latest podcast, the main reason we're chatting today, is called Broadway Bound, the musicals that never came to Broadway. It's a fascinating series with stories and interviews you won't find anywhere else. If you like my content here, you will absolutely eat this podcast up. I chat with Rob all about the new series, his upcoming concert at 54 Below, the upcoming J2 Spotlight season, and of course, there's a lot of theater nerd side tangents in there as well.
Let's go crazy Broadway style!
All the links to everything we discuss are in the video description below, but now, without further ado, let's get to chatting. Robert W. Schneider, thank you so much for being on Broadway by Ghostlight today. Welcome.
Mark, I feel so honored because I love your show so much. I watch it all the time. I eagerly look forward. The fact a couple of days ago you told me you were going to drop a Rink one, and I could not wait until I saw it. It's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was an interesting one. A little more dramatic than my usual fare.
I liked it. Give us a little contrast there and stuff like that. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I like is the shows that a Wikipedia article and a cast recording are all we sort of have to go off of. So I try to make something for us visual learners to latch on to.
I'm a visual learner as well. Like that's like the best way to receive, like for me at least, like information and stuff. But I mean, it's so good. Your work on it is so good.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, only based on the greatness that has come before me, you, sir, I mean, with your podcast, so Behind the Curtain, I mean,
I'm not great, but thank you.
Oh no, absolutely incredible. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And then you've got, I think this one now we're going to talk about is your 4th podcast.
Is think that correct? So. I'm going to count really. I think it is. Yeah, Behind the Curtain was 1. Gay Card Revoke was 2. 50 Key Musicals was 3. I do one called This Was a Thing.
Right. So this is the 5th.
This is the 5th. This is number 5. Wow. Okay, great.
That's amazing.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I you know what? I bought a mic and I'm like, I'm going to use it.
I'm going to get every
last
bite out of
this thing. Yes. And what's funny is I don't really listen to podcasts on my own. So it's kind of weird because people are like, do you have any other podcast recommendations? I'm like, I don't really listen to any.
Not a podcast. That's so funny. I'm not really a podcast person either, except honestly yours and a few others that I listen to.
I'm honored, Mark. I'm honored that
it's true. I mean, it's one of my, and when I got chosen as one of the favorite things in a episode years ago now, I mean, it was like the highlight of my life.
Oh my God. No, seriously, your videos are so good and your work is so good. And it was the least we could do to let everybody know how brilliant you are. So, and your numbers are fantastic. It's so exciting when I see how many views your videos get. I'm like, yes.
Hugging along little by little. I'm pleasantly surprised, it's hard when, I have other friends who have YouTube channels who, I mean, have hundreds of thousands of subscribers and tens of thousands of views but then at the same time I look at where I started and it's like, wow, I used to get so excited for 100 views. I mean, that was like a major deal, and now we're in the thousands. And
yes, and it will keep climbing as more and more people realize how brilliant you are. So there you go.
Well, and something I guess you could certainly relate to is the problem. It's what we love and what we talk about is fairly niche.
Oh God,
and there's really no way to get around it being super niche.
No, it's weird because like you're like, okay, well, here's like the whole podcasting community. And then you're like, okay, anyone who's interested in theater. And
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, anyone interested in happy hunting? And it's
right.
like,
And it's just you get that little sliver of people.
and then I don't know if you find this, but I find like a lot of people that you're like, oh, I love happy hunting. They're like, what's a podcast? So then it's like, you're like, I'd
Yeah.
love to do a radio show about Ethel Merman. Is she on it? Unless there's a Ouija board. No, I don't think so. Um, but yeah, yeah, we are we are a little tricky group. A little,
Yeah,
but I think that's why everyone in our community is so supportive of each other, because I think we all know how difficult this is.
absolutely. Well, speaking of your newest podcast, Broadway Bound,
Yeah.
this show, for all you, I'm sure I've said it in the intro already, but if you're a fan of my channel, people watching, you are gonna eat up every second of this podcast. It is so exciting. What a great topic. It's shows that almost or intended to come to Broadway and for whatever reasons just didn't do it. They died a borning, as the famous book
Yes.
states. I was going to try to find my copy somewhere. I forgot to do that. I think I have that book somewhere.
I've always thought that was such a fascinating title. The musicals that died a
A
boarding.
borning. It's like,
And you're like, what? A
ooh,
what? It's like, man, it sounds very sad.
oh
Okay. Yeah.
God. So you
There's
just started it this month, right? I mean, you've got
our, our first episode. Yeah, our first episode launched February 1st, and we're now 4 episodes in as of this recording. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So far, we've covered Arthur, the musical, The Graduate, the musical.
Which I didn't know existed.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the fun thing about like doing the show, which is like you go in to research like one show. I think I was like going into research Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then it was like, oh yeah, but then Bob Merrill didn't really do anything. Well, I mean, he did that graduate thing, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, what graduate thing? Like,
Yeah.
come back, tell me about that. But yeah, so there's the graduate Minsky's, which is really good, and then a Busker Alley, which was the Tommy Tune extravaganza.
Hey guys, I realize we talk a lot about the show Busker Alley here without really explaining what it is, or what it was rather. The full incredible story of the show is obviously a great episode of the Broadway Bound podcast you should check out. But the show was set to come into Broadway in the 90s, starring Tommy Tune as Charlie, a busker or street performer, and his young love interest he meets named Libby. The show had a tumultuous pre-Broadway tour with several name changes, as we'll discuss, and ended unceremoniously with Mr. Tune breaking his foot right before heading to Broadway. Or was that just an excuse? You'll have to listen to the Broadway Bound episode to find out. But back to the interview.
And I have a
No.
post on my wall. I'm going to show you. I don't know if you can see it, but there's.
Yes, I have that poster signed by Robert B. Sherman.
Oh, wait, that's really cool.
Because I saw Busker Alley.
Wait, tell me everything. Where'd you see it? When'd you see it? Walk me through this.
I saw it I lived in Orange County, California. It's where I grew up. So I saw it at the Orange County Performing Arts Center when it came through. And
So cool.
just as your podcast will explain brilliantly, my ticket said Stage Door Charlie.
Yes.
My playbill program I was given said Busker Alley. And my souvenir program said Buskers.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Look at that. Look
So
at
this
that.
is my well-worn souvenir program.
They're the lampposts.
There they are. That's, so I was in 95, I was 11 when I saw this show, so I don't remember much. I remember the lamppost. I remember being very confused about all the different Charlies.
Yes.
And I remember the puppets. I remember Marsha Lewis and her dog puppet.
Yes. Oh my God, you got to see it. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, Tommy Tune. Look at him. He's showing off some arm muscle there. Good for him.
Right?
Look at
Yeah,
that.
it's yeah, I've had this
There are the lampposts.
for years.
There are the lampposts.
So I was
So-
there.
I am so jealous. So your program said a different show, your playbill said a different show, and your ticket said a different show.
Yep. All three.
Yeah.
I remember, somewhere is my Stage Door Charlie ticket.
Oh my God, they could never find a title for this thing.
No, it thought I think that was the least of the problems.
I know. I was like, I said, I think you've got other issues to be worrying about. The title, the titles go,
Yeah.
they'll work itself out,
I just
friends.
remember it being a weird show. I mean, I was like I said, I was 11. I was just really getting into musicals. I started my love for theater very late, as opposed to a lot of people in the biz who grew up. No one was musical minded in my family. Theater was not a thing. Um, but I just remember it being really a confusing show. It wasn't a typical. I mean, I'd seen Hello Dolly with Carol Channing, and I'd seen like Damn Yankees with Jerry Lewis, and then there was this weird new show.
And when you went to see it, did you go with like family or friends, or did you go by
Yeah,
yourself?
my grandma and grandpa a season pass, a subscription to the Performing Arts Center, and so in fourth grade, when I sort of got the theater bug, they would take me with them. My first show was Sound of Music with Marie Osmond.
Get out. Really?
Yeah,
Please say Donny Osmond played Captain Von Trapp just to make it really creepy.
that would just be so weird.
So, now, wait a minute, wait a minute. Did your grandparents, were they, after they saw the show, were they like, what is this thing?
I don't even remember. I don't think any of us enjoyed it. I also, I
Okay,
didn't
you know,
know at the time who Tommy Tune was, or that wasn't any like it wasn't like, oh well, at least there's Tommy Tune doing what he does. I had no idea as a kid.
yeah, but it also sounds like the people who did know who Tommy Tune was were like, not for us.
Yeah, I remember being just sort of a little bit of a downer,
It's a
a
very, yeah,
somber.
it's a depressing show because like the big problem with it, and it's kind of in the source material, and it's hard to figure out, which is the love interest, you don't want them together because he's so nice and she's such a jerk. So like, how do you like get invested in a love story where you're like, they shouldn't be together? And then at the end, that's what happens. So at the end, so then
Right.
you're like, well, I should be happy they're not together, but he's not happy. So it's all very convoluted. It's very
Yeah.
convoluted. And I think it's something we talk about on the podcast, which is like, and I know this is like a Stephen Sondheim thing, which is like a why musical. Like, why do you think adding music to this story is going to help it in some way? And I think a lot of times when like new musical writers look at like a movie or something like that, and they'll go, oh, well, there's music that's part of the story, so therefore it should be a musical. And it's like, that's no, yes, music is part of the story of Sidewalks of London, which is what Busker Alley is based on, but it doesn't mean that it's a musical, if
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a lot
sense.
of, I think, somewhat recent shows, movies turn into musicals where I'm like, this would be great if it was a play, but with an orchestra giving the music, I don't want to name names and shame any shows, but would be better as a play with music elements.
110%, 110%. And that I think is kind of where the Busker Alley thing is now. There's a lot of great music in Busker Alley slash Stage Star Charlie slash Busker slash what are we calling it now slash he broke his leg. But like for me, I'm like, it's not, there's no love story.
Yep.
Like there's nothing to be invested in except you want him to get really far away from this horrible person. I think in the podcast, I'm like, it's almost like if you're watching The Wedding Singer and you're like, oh, I want him to end up with or I want her to end up with Glenn. So it's like if you want like you don't root for Robbie and Linda to get together because you're like, that's
Right.
bad for Robbie, and you don't root for what's her name? Julia and Glenn to get together, mostly because of the name. What's her name? Julia
Julia
Gulia? Was that?
Gulia, yeah.
But so that's, I don't know. So that's hard. But I think sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, that's a musical because music is a part of the story. And you're like, yeah, but is it a musical? Is the music telling us information that we don't already know?
Right. There has to be a reason to sing.
There has to be a reason to sing. And there, and it's hard because like one of the things like you explore in this podcast is I don't want to say like you should know better, but a lot of the musicals that we cover, these are like really well established writers that you think they would be the ones being like, why don't young people ask why anymore? And they're not asking themselves why. So I think that's kind of cool to explore. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so when I went to look today at something, I saw that the Minsky's episode has dropped, and that one
Yes.
I didn't get to see, but and I haven't listened to it yet, but that was always a heartbreak to me. I was so excited for that show to come in.
Me too. Minsky's was a show that was, I think, really a product of its time. And that's why it didn't come in because had Minsky's come in, I think maybe like 3 seasons earlier, like right after Drowsy Chaperone, when people were still really invested in like it's a backstage musical and it's kind of meta theater. Like because that was so popular in the early aughts.
Hmm.
I think that then I think the show would have been a success. But by the time it came around, which was I think 2009, we were like we're ready for Next to Normal. We're ready for In the Heights. We're interested in Fela. Anyway, but like that's what people I think were interested in at that point. So I think to be like, oh well, we're doing another meta musical and we're doing another musical about how great it is to be an actor. I think people were like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like I want to go to Washington Heights. I want to go deal. You know what I mean? I think people were really ready to move on from that, which is
Yeah.
a shame. And everything is cyclical. So who knows? Maybe in a couple of years when we need that nostalgia again, Minsky's might make a return. But the score is really lovely. Really lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to listen to that one. And Arthur too is another one I'm fascinated by. I have the live recording from one of the places.
As
So yeah. Uh,
an but you know what? Had Arthur succeeded, we might never have had the TV show Friends.
which yeah, which then which is a great segue. Please talk about the incredible guests you have on this podcast. Holy crap.
Oh, we got very lucky. So I think it's important, like, for us to hear who was actually there when it was happening and what was it like to be in the trenches at this moment. So for Arthur the musical, the original writers, Marta Kaufman and David Crane and Michael Skloff, who Marta and David went off to write Friends together, and then Michael wrote the theme song to Friends that everybody knows. So they're all in this together. They were Broadway babies. They loved Broadway. They loved musical theater, and what they wanted to do was write musicals. And Arthur, which was based on the movie with Dudley Moore and Liza Minnelli, they were turning that into a musical. It was taking forever and ever. And every time it was getting done, it really wasn't going anywhere. So finally, they were like, you know what? Let's try writing a TV show and seeing what happens. And that was about six single friends living in New York City. And
Wow.
but what I love about so anyway, so people like them, they appeared, they were like, yeah, we'll talk about it. It hasn't been released yet, but our episode on Breakfast at Tiffany's, James Burrows, 10-time Emmy award-winning TV director James Burrows, was the assistant stage manager on it in 1966. And so I reached out to him and I said, I'm sure everybody wants to talk to you about Cheers and Frasier. And I said, I'd like to talk to you about Breakfast at Tiffany's. And he's like, I would love that. So we have Stephen Schwartz, Casey Nicholaw, John Bolton, Chris Sieber. It's like a really Leslie Ann Warren. It's a really
Which my Drat the Cat loving heart was like,
yes,
Leslie Ann Warren, oh my God.
yes. She's gonna
Please
come
talk to her
on.
about Drat the Cat at least a little bit.
We did. She talked a little bit about how because she had done Drat the Cat, Joe Layden, who directed that, was directing Gone with the Wind, and offered because he liked her so much from Drat, he offered her the role of Scarlett O'Hara. There was like no audition for it. And so we talk a little bit about that in the episode. Because she went on and did Gone with the Wind with him. So yeah, so we're very lucky. But I think it's important to get these people's thoughts and opinions, and it ranges. Like Busker Alley, then there are some shows where people don't want to talk to us.
Yeah,
Where yeah, we've had people go, you know what, it was really painful for me, and I really don't want to revisit it.
wow.
It's
After all
kind of
these years still.
Yeah, which is kind of a shame because one of the things that I'm hoping that the podcast does is we're looking to celebrate these shows and to celebrate the work that went into them because nobody sets out to write a bad show. Nobody sets out to write a show that they know is not going to come in. Like, that's just not how this is done. And so, I think so many of these people feel like ashamed or embarrassed. It was interesting, like talking to the Friends writers, these individuals, they are literally sitting on a pile of money. Literally sitting on a pile of money. And they changed the way television is done. They created one of the most iconic television shows ever in history. And they're sitting there going, boy, I wish we could have done better on Arthur. So I think for a lot of these people, it's kind of cathartic for them to not only come back and revisit it, but to also go, oh, wow, actually, even though I left with a bad taste in my mouth or a bad memory, my work on it was actually quite good. And I think like when you listen to the Arthur episode, which is the first episode, the music in it is very good. I think they did a really lovely job with it. So yeah. But it's important to get all these people, whoever's willing to come on and talk about it, to remember it a little bit, And I'm curious because now I'm interested if like once these episodes get out there more, if there are going to be individuals who say like, I know you invited me to be on it and I said no, but now that I've heard the episode, I'd like to come back and either add on to it or refute what other people said about me.
Which would also be interesting. I'm all for that.
Which would also be interesting. Yeah. So
So this
yeah,
first season, you have themes for each season, which
love a
I
theme.
can't wait to hear for the 40th season what the theme will be, because there will
Good.
be that many seasons. So the first theme for the first season is movies turned into musicals.
Yeah.
And I know some of the ones you've got coming up. One of the ones I'm really interested in hearing about is Mambo Kings.
That's next week.
Oh,
That's
well,
next.
there you go. Because my good friend Jaime Camille, of course, uh, was one of the stars of it, and we've talked about it.
Yes.
I've talked about it with him in the past. My merch, I first started working as a merch guy in Broadway, did like 70 different shows, and my merch company was going to do the merch for Mambo King. So
Oh,
I have some of the prototype merch. Like I have like these little booty short underwear that just say Mambo Kings on the butt somewhere in my collection. Weird
okay,
stuff like that.
do not donate that. I will buy some of that stuff. I would
No,
love some
nothing
Mambo
of mine
swag.
ever gets donated,
Oh, great. I would love some Mambo swag at some point.
right?
Now, you see, now that one to me is a heartbreaker because I wanted to have Daryl and Jordan Roth on the show because they were the original producers of it. And they both said very respectfully, they said, we it was such a sad experience for us that we kind of don't want to revisit it. And I understand that wholeheartedly. But what I really wanted to do was to get them on the air to say they were trying to put positive Latinx characters on stage at a time when that was not happening in musicals. Because you had West Side Story, you had Zoot Suit, and you had The Cape Man. And all three of them are dealing with Latinx individuals involved in some either criminal behavior, and it's not good. And I think Lin-Manuel Miranda later on said, well, one of the reasons I wanted to do In the Heights was because I wanted to show a positive representation. So In the Heights is 2009, and now most people will say, oh yeah, that was the first musical that celebrated the Latinx community in a positive light. But I'm like, Mambo Kings was trying to do that and came really close to the finish line on that. So I was like, I want to have the Roths on to say, you should be congratulated and celebrated for trying to do something nobody else wanted to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm like, I would love for them to be on the show just to be like, oh wow, we tried to do something that nobody else was willing to do, and they should be, I think, applauded for that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that was there. That was one where the marquees were up, just like
I
Buster Alley.
remember.
And
I remember because I'm from California too. I'm also from California. And so I remember like one trip over the summer, I remember walking by the Broadway Theater and seeing that like yellow marquee with the woman's leg wrapped around the guy.
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is gonna be a cool show. And like Billy D. Williams is gonna be in it. And I, and then he dropped out. But I remember seeing that poster. And I think that was like one of the first shows I ever saw where the marquee was up and then it didn't come in. And I was like, how is that possible?
Right?
Like, this is not how this goes.
Speaking of other shows, I've been researching little spoiler highlight for you guys watching. I'm working on my next video, a making of Singing in the Rain, one of my favorite
Oh,
movies. And there's really no like online like document. Not that I make documentaries, but like I wanted
you
to do
do.
a
Yeah.
nice making of anyway. And they're talking about with Comden and Green, they're talking about Bonanza Bound.
Yes.
So that sounds like a really interesting show.
That one, I'm pretty sure. I'm debating right now between two themes for our next season. And one of them, if we do that theme, we will definitely do Bonanza Bound. That will definitely be part of it. Because that show is absolutely fascinating. It followed on the town. I think it was the show, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you now know this probably better than I do, which is I feel like the failure of that caused them to go off to Hollywood, if I'm
Yeah,
remembering
that was
something like
sort of
that. Yeah,
yeah,
which
they were
allowed.
working on that right before and then jumped to Hollywood to write for Arthur Freed and we had Singing in the Rain.
I will say this: if you get the chance, Mark, go down to the Library for the Performing Arts, right? The Compton and Green Papers. The file on this musical version of Singing in the Rain is really interesting because it
Mm.
has a lot of private correspondence between Comden and Green and Twyla Tharp. who directed and choreographed it, and it's very interesting. That's all I'm
Hmm.
gonna say. It's very
Interesting.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yes.
I'll have to check that out.
Yes. That's actually, I have to thank the New York Public Library because so much of the stuff that we're doing on this particular podcast, Broadway Bound, has been because the library's been so helpful to us. And like you read like private correspondence. And so like a lot of things on the podcast that people will not like you'll hear are things that nobody's ever heard before. Private letters, private journal entries, notes about who wanted to be replaced and all that stuff. So that public library is a wealth of information.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Yeah, that's what makes this podcast, I think, so special. It's full out histories of things that you would think the histories might have been lost
Yeah.
to the times, and you're preserving that, which is such an honorable and incredible endeavor.
Thank you. My feeling is that I think there's this misconception that if a musical is doesn't play Broadway, it's not a good musical. And or the only work that somebody created was what was seen in Times Square. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. I mean, I think I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we've probably seen shows in California that were better than some things we've seen on Broadway, you know?
Absolutely.
And just because Stephen Sondheim was a genius on Company because it came to Broadway doesn't mean he wasn't a genius on Bounce slash Wise Guys slash Roadshow because it didn't get to Broadway. And so that I think it's important to preserve an entire artist's whole career as opposed to what was commercially successful, and if I even want to put it in those terms. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like my last breakdown of Annie Warbucks, there was a bit
Yes.
of that because it's like why didn't this it had all the makings, and I think there was this sense of, well, it's off Broadway, so that means it's not good enough to be on Broadway,
Yes.
so we're not going to go see it.
Yes. Although, and think about what was that 30 years ago? And now it's like, well, it has to go off Broadway to prove that it's good enough for Broadway,
Right.
which is a whole
Absolutely.
different business model now. So it's so amazing how those things like can change and go back and forth, and what you would think is dismissive 15 years ago is now like mandatory 15 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we our next one of the things I'm contemplating for doing next season is called "You're Only as Good as Your Last," and it's musicals from individuals who were like really big in the industry, like a Comden and Green or Stephen Sondheim. But Annie too would slash Annie Warbucks will definitely be on there, so I might bring you on as the expert if you're willing to help
Yeah,
me out.
sure. I definitely dived more into Annie Warbucks than Annie too, but
Yeah,
it's a
that will help.
fascinating uh tale. And they work so hard to make these shows work. It's not just here's what no, it didn't work. Oh well. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, and
it's years sometimes.
it's not. I mean, and then I think like look at some shows that have been really successful. That took a long time. Like Curtains, I think was
Hmm.
around like 82 or 85 or
Was
something.
it that early? My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, and then it took them decades to get to Broadway. And Harmony.
Yeah, that's another one.
I remember Harmony was playing out in LA like in the late 90s.
Yeah, 98, I think it started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was one where and I think Danny Burstein and Rebecca Luke are married on, like they met each other on it, and that's how they got married and stuff. Or that I think that's the right show that they met on. But anyway, like you said, people don't give up on these dreams. And for a lot of composers and writers, it's so personal to them that they couldn't get this story out. Look at somebody like Steven Schwartz. This guy is a multi-bazillionaire, has an Oscar, does Tony's, doesn't need to work, and he's still sitting there going, "How do I make Baker's Wife work? How do
Right?
I? How do we make Rags work?"
Mm,
He doesn't have to do that. He could have been like, "Screw it, I got Wicked. I'm the Wicked guy." So I
right?
don't know, and I think that there's always a sense of I want to get this right, and I think no matter where your status is, that never changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of I mean they don't do it ultimately for the money. They do it for because that's in their blood. That's what they need to do, and they need to get it right. And I mean, you have to love a subject matter in order to devote your passion and your talent to it. So,
You are living with this story day in and day out. I'm trying to, there's only one musical I feel like in this first season where the writer was not enamored with the story, and that's the Gone with the Wind one. Because the score is by Harold Rome, and Harold Rome throughout the process is doing it, but it feels very much like I'm cashing a paycheck. And I
mm,
think that's part of the downs. And I think it's the last episode of the season this year. I think you'll hear it. To me, I think he was the biggest problem with that particular show, which is that he didn't seem too invested in it, but also he's not the right person for it. Harold Rome is like, what's the pins and needles, which is,
yeah.
it's political. He's blue collar. He's got things he wants to say. And then Gone with the Wind is Southern delicacy and, a genteel way of doing things. And it's like two styles that don't match each other. I think I say this in the Gone with the Wind, but like if it was Harold Arlen doing it or Yip Harburg doing it,
Mm-hmm.
then I think I would go, okay, this makes a little bit more sense to me. But that to me is the only one I think where the author was just like, you know, is the
Mm,
check is the check clearing? Yeah.
yeah.
Do you know about this Gone with the Wind, by the way? The 8 hour Gone with the Wind from Tokyo?
Yeah. And now, where is that the one that was called Scarlet at some point?
Yes. It was called Scarlet. In Japan, it was Japan's first homegrown musical. And then they changed the title in London. They went back to Gone with the Wind, which was smart. Then they took it to LA before Broadway, and it stopped right there. But what's really fascinating is for the Japanese production, which was the original, and maybe you know this, so shut me up if you know this, was Harold Rome's wife, Florence, was told, hey, listen, you're going to go and try to put on an American musical in Japan who's never done a musical before. Because you're not actively involved in the artistic process, you're going to be a really great observer. You should keep a diary of everything that was going on. And she did, and she published it. And the book is called The Scarlet Letters. And
Yes.
if you go on the Internet Archive, which is like amazing for everybody, it's there for free. You can read it. And it is fascinating. Like, but I think what you see really clearly in that book is the only reason Harold Rome got the job to be the composer on Gone with the Wind is because the company that was producing it, Margaret Mitchell's agent who had to give approval for it, shared an office with Harold Rome's agent and literally just knocked on his door. And she's like, I don't want to make this complicated for me. Do you have anybody who could write the score for this thing? And the agent was like, Harold Rome. And she goes, okay, great, let's make it happen. Like there wasn't any sort of like meetings or vetting or like, can you write a song on spec? It was just like, I want to do this in-house so I don't have to have a lot of paperwork, which I think is amazing.
Wow. That's so crazy for something as potentially monumental as Gone with the Wind, the musical.
It was literally a knock on the door being like, can we just do this in-house so I don't have to go across the street?
Wow. So the author, wish you were here, wish he wasn't
Mhm.
there.
Oh, that's a great. Oh, I should use that as a subtitle. That sounds so fantastic. But so I don't know. So I don't think Harold Rome is the right person for this show. But like I said, Harold Arlen, Yip Harburg, maybe Burden Lane, like any of those individuals, I think would be the right person for it. And apparently, they just weren't represented by this particular agent, so they didn't have a chance at it.
So crazy. I just wonder, like, what if like Jerry Herman's agent was in next door? We could have had, Scarlet, Scarlet.
Oh yeah, coming down the stairs while like Tara's burning around her, just like all these flames and stuff. That's exactly what we want.
Oh
What we
goodness.
want. Yeah, it's a great book though, Scarlet Letters, if you get the chance.
Scarlet. I have heard of it. I haven't
It's
read it
really, yeah,
yet.
it's very
But
funny.
the accounts from a show like from beginning to end, like I don't know if you read the No No Nanette revival book. One
Oh,
of the
like my
juiciest,
Bible.
greatest books.
I'm gonna be honest with you, Mark, and people look at me like I'm crazy. If I knew Ryan Murphy, I would be like, that's your next feud.
Right? It's
Like Seema
so
Rubin
good.
versus Harry Rigby. And you have the old actresses, you have like this nostalgia. I don't know. I was like, Ryan Murphy, if you're listening, please look at the making of No No Nanette by Don Dunn because it's a
Right?
fabulous book.
It's so good, like that, and the Follies.
Oh,
Everything was
Ted.
possible. It's
Yeah,
like a
oh, yeah,
perfect companion, two
yeah.
companion pieces.
And God bless these people for like having the wherewithal to go, this might be something. I'm gonna take time out to keep a journal. Because
Yeah.
I don't know, like when you're working on a show or a project, you're like, I don't have time to then go home and be like, Dear Diary, today I felt I was betrayed by the lyricist. What shall I do tomorrow? Like, you just want to be like, I need a drink, and I'm gonna put the covers over my head.
Right. Crazy.
Sort of how
So
I, yeah.
so the podcast Broadway Bound it came out of your successful concert series, am I right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, 54. Yeah.
Which you've got another one coming up. I'm not sure when this will release, but it's coming up March 5th.
Yes, March 5th. March 5th, we are doing another Broadway. Yeah, that's actually how the podcast got started. So, because I'm one of the producers over at 54 Below, and I was like, let's get some of these songs out there. Let's get some of these out there. But the problem is like when you're doing a show there, you've only got like 70 minutes, and people are there for music. They're not there for talking. So like you have to keep the stories like as condensed as possible, and you can really only be like, oh, I just gotta really pick one song from this show, even though there's five amazing songs I could pick. And so then I was like, well, I'm gonna write a book on this. I was like, I'll write a book. I want to do like a Nonsense Carrie that's all about musicals that didn't come in. And then I started to work on it, and I thought, the fun of it is hearing this. Like you can't describe it. You have to actually, I think, hear the beautiful work that was put into it. So that's when the podcast came to fruition. But our next one, yes, is on March 5th. And I'm excited because Carlos Franzetti, who was the composer of the Mambo Kings, he's going to be with us.
Wow.
And Christiane Knoll, who was also in the Mambo Kings, she's going to be with us as well. They're going to tell us a story about that. I'm trying to think what else we have. We're going to have a song from Bonanza Bound.
Oh,
How perfect is that? We're going to do a song called "Fill Her Up," which is very very fun. Yeah, we have songs from like The Apprenticeship of Duty Kravitz that Alan Menken did, Tales from the City. A musical that Michael Levine, the brilliant music director Michael Levine, who has every single sheet music ever been
yes.
created. Michael is doing a song from a musical. I was like, I don't know what this is. From Lerner and Lowe, no, not Lerner and Lowe. I'm sorry, Lawrence and Lee, the guys who wrote like Mame and Inherit the Wind, did a musical called Dilly, which was a satire on Hollywood in the 40s. And we're gonna sing a song from that. So it's exciting. It's very exciting. And of
That
course the
sounds
mom. Yes.
amazing.
So if anyone's able to come into town on March 6th and come see it, I'm sorry, March
5th,
5th.
5th.
Apologize, 5th. Thank you. March 5th. God, I'll show up on the wrong day. That's not a good thing. We'd love to have you. It's a really fun event, and you'll hear some really great stories, and it's a really lovely cast of people.
And this is
Marty,
the sixth edition.
this is number 6. Yeah. It's so weird, Mark. We did it like in 2017, and then we stopped and we picked it up again in 2023. So there was a very long hiatus. And now like it's like we did 3, 4, 5, 6, and now we're just cranking them out.
Amazing.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to come, we would love to have you. It would mean the world to us. And
That's
also, I
such a
don't know,
fun.
thanks, Mark. I was like, also, I don't know when you're going to hear these songs again. So
Yeah, that's another thing. So is there a show that you've wanted to include, you try to research, and there's just nothing, you've reached an impasse that you can't, there's nothing, there's not a full story there for you to tell?
yeah, there's been a couple. Like one of the shows that really intrigued me was Harold and Maude, that
Hmm.
Tom Jones, no, it was a Tom, yeah, Tom Jones and Joe Thalken wrote over, and it was in paper mill and it's been at the York and stuff. That one I was like, this could be really interesting. And it just wasn't. Like the story wasn't as interesting as I was hoping it was gonna be. So that was one, because I think in our original season for Broadway Bound, we were gonna do 12 episodes. We did 10. Harold and Maude was one of them, and Marty is the other one. Marty, that Strauss and Adams did, with John C. Riley in the lead, over in Huntington, at Huntington in Boston in 2002. That was one also where it's like there's not really a story here.
Yeah, because I
Like it
mean,
was.
Sondheim tried to do Marty.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, he wanted to do Marty, and that's how he got up. He got Another Saturday Night. or Saturday, sorry, not another Sunday, just Saturday night is how
Oh my God.
it's
I
sort of
didn't
it's
know.
sort of like how they did Steel Pier wasn't they shoot horses, don't they? But
Yes.
sort of what that's what I feel like Saturday night was with Marty.
That's really fascinating. I didn't know that.
I
I
could
did.
be
Oh,
wrong on that, but that's
no,
my memory is telling me that that's what it
that
was.
I feel like that's appropriate. And yeah, and so this particular one, just for me, I was like, oh, it's not. It's it's a good show, but it seemed pretty basic, and it just seemed not the show being basic, but like the story being basic. Of we tried to do it, it didn't happen, and there's really nothing for me at least juicy there. Maybe when I start talking to people, there'll be like another. Maybe there's some more stuff there. And we also, the one I was like on the fence about, and I ended up cutting it, was I wanted to do At the Grand, which was the first version of
First,
Grand Hotel, right?
mm-hmm.
And then I was like, but it did come to Broadway. It just had like a different title and new songs, but and for me, I was like, the story of Grand Hotel being resurrected and getting to Broadway is more interesting than the
For
At the
you.
Grand story. So I don't, so a couple of those were ones where I was like, there's just not enough there.
Yeah, maybe you'll do a quick bites, little
You know,
like 10-minute versions of
that's a really great idea. That's a really good idea because our first season ends April 4th. And then I'm not picking it up again until October 6th or something. Because, take the summer off, do the research, find the shows, all that stuff. So I think I might do some little quick bites. That's a really great idea. Yeah.
that'd be fun. There's so many shows I'm thinking, it's like, oh, well, you said Tales of the City, but that technically came to Broadway for one night.
Yeah, they had that
I
concert
saw it. It was
of
great.
it. Yeah. And I love the series. Like I love the TV series and stuff. So I really wanted to see the musical. But yeah, that counts. That was, for a one night on Broadway. Um
I'm sure
so
you've got like Grover's Corners on the list, and
So I think Grover's Corners would be on if I do the one where it's about the composer, like the big composers, that would definitely be on the list. Although I hear the Thornton Wilder estate is very touchy about this, so I think I would need to gingerly approach them and say, "Would you like to get your side of the story on air?" Excuse me. Yeah.
gotcha. I was thinking about that. Golden Gate would be another interesting one.
Gate would be interesting. And I would love to talk to some of these people before, would John Kander be willing to come talk about this before he gets, too busy with other things? So I
Hmm.
there's that's also what makes it kind of tricky on like ones from the golden age, which is, well, who's around to talk about it?
Right.
Who's around to still discuss this? So that also kind of limits you a tiny bit. But next year or next season when we're doing like if we end up doing this, that you're only as good as your last, then I think with that we'll probably get more into like the golden age and we'll do some more of those, those things
Yeah.
uh, like the one like Bonanza Bound. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the skin of our teeth one? All of
Oh,
us,
that one
or
is on. Yeah, all of the skin of our teeth, all about us, over and over. It had like 400 different names. Also, the Thornton Wilder estate. I think that was where things went down. So,
mm,
because I know definitely they're the ones who are preventing Grover's Corners from happening, the musical, which is a shame.
oh.
Because you ever heard the score?
I've heard the demo years ago,
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful score, and I honestly think it's Jones and Schmidt's best work, and no one's going to hear it.
which is
And
a
no one,
shame. I
and
think
no one,
someone did it I went to AMD. I think someone did it one of the songs in
yeah,
class. Yeah.
yeah. There's a beautiful song I think called "Goodbye World" that she
I
sings.
think that's the one that she sang. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's gorgeous. And I should tell, your viewers and stuff that all the Broadway Bound concerts that we do at 54 Below, they're filmed and then they're all put up online. So if you go to, my channel, Robert Schneider, there's a Broadway Bound playlist. So you can hear all of these different songs that have been performed at 54. So if you can't make it to the club, don't worry, you'll still get a chance to see it at some point. But Goodbye World is on there, sung by a lovely girl named Ali Belenkoff. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song. But the Wilder estate still has, a craw, something stuck in their craw, and they don't want to release it. They feel like they were lied to. They feel like they were promised the show was going to be a workshop, and it ended up being a full production. And they were like, "That's not what we agreed to. You lied to us. We're done."
Wow.
And they felt, as far as I understand it, they felt very, very betrayed. I don't know what the issue is on the skin of our teeth. I've also heard that the Wilder estate was also pulled the plug on that one as well. So I don't know what goes on, but I'm very curious to find out.
When does that come into public domain? How much longer we got?
Oh, that's a really good point. That's a great point. I don't know. When is that? Our Town was what, in the 30s?
Was it that late? I thought it was earlier, but hmm. Let's
I've
see. 1938.
okay. It
Maybe
feels
we'll
like
see it in
it,
our lifetimes.
right?
Yeah, maybe we'll see it in 1930. We'll do the first full
Let's do
production.
Mark, let's make the promise now that that's what we're going to do.
We're gonna do it.
We're going to take this material and run with it. There's so many, and the Ken Mandelbaum's Not Since Carrie is such a great resource for it. But the two books, and I think we talked about this before we went on the air. Maybe we did when we did go on the air. Please forgive me. Is the uh, Broadway Bound, right? The musicals that died a
It died of
borning.
boring, yeah.
Is a great book, and there's another one called The Musicals That No One Came to See.
Ooh.
And I think that one is by Rick Seamus. I think that's it. And that one is also a really fabulous resource.
Hmm.
Both I think are out of print, but I think both are on the Internet Archive. So
There you go.
this Internet Archive was very helpful. Internet Archive and newspapers.com were two of my greatest resources for the research. So if you're ever debating about getting a subscription to either one, do it. It is worth every penny.
Amazing.
We're not
Well,
sponsoring, I'm just saying it.
right? Plugging that out there.
Yeah.
Uh, Before we wrap up, I want to touch upon, I know we're here to talk about the amazing podcast, but I want to touch upon the J2 Spotlight
Oh,
series. Can you
thanks.
explain to the people what that is and it's so amazing.
Yes, my good friend Jim Jamiro and I, we love musicals from the golden age and what we consider our golden age as well, which is the 60s and 70s. And we created a mini encores. So we now have actually at AMT this year. So coming up in April, we're doing two productions of musicals that are never really seen. The first one opening April 19th is Do Re Mi, which is
Raimi.
one of my favorites. Betty Comden, Adolph Green, Julie Stein, and Garson Kanin. Wonderful musical with the songs are like banger after banger. Fireworks, Make Someone Happy, What's New at the Zoo, Adventure. I know about the list goes on and on and on.
One of my favorite is Late Late Show is one of my favorite numbers. So
Which is
funny.
so genius and so brilliant. So we're doing that, which is very exciting. And then on May 3rd, we're doing the musical Lucky Stiff by Ahrens and Flaherty. And Lucky Stiff is the reason we're doing it is it's Stephen Lynn's 40th anniversary of working together. And this was the first show they ever did together. And so they were kind enough to let us do this to celebrate their anniversary. And they're going to be working on the show with us, which is really lovely. And they've been fantastic.
Oh,
But it's also a really fun, both of these shows are really funny. And I think what we're really proud of is that, especially 2024 is a complicated year, that you can come to the theater, you can live in the past for a little bit, and you can laugh yourself silly and then go back out into the real world, hopefully with some more joy in your heart. But
absolutely.
thank you. And so and our see, I think you can get, like, if you go onto our website, you can get tickets to both shows. Plus, we do two cabarets throughout the season, each one celebrating the works of the authors. And I think like for $190, you get tickets to all four shows. So for the price of one Broadway ticket, you get to see four shows. So we really hope people come out and support us. And we're already talking about what we're going to do next season. And I think you'll be excited because I know we have one definite for next year that is a show that I know you've covered on your series.
Hmm.
So I'm very excited about that.
Interesting. Well, and not only do you get the two shows plus the two cabarets, is after the performances, you guys do a whole. It's not called a talkback series. I will not pronounce it on air, but what is it?
It is no, it's called our lagniappe series. In New
Lanyap.
Orleans, lagniappe is a French word that means a little bonus, a little something extra. And one of the things that's important to Jim and I, is this idea of making sure that there's like an educational component of this. So yes, after every single performance except opening and closing, there is a either talk back with the cast or the writers if they're still with us, or the original cast members will come and talk about their experiences on the show. But we want, you can't do this anywhere else but New York. You just can't. This is a community of people who love these shows, who love these stories. They bring back fond memories for everybody. And the fact that all of these wonderful people who help create these shows are still living in this area, it just makes it an even richer experience. So we want to make sure that, like, you as the audience have a fully inclusive experience. You're not just seeing the show, you're also getting some education out of it at the same time.
Which I
And
love. I mean, honestly, I love, there's been a few there, like you mentioned, Encores is, the big budget one, and there was some others that don't exist anymore. Musicals Tonight
yeah,
doesn't
Mel.
exist.
Yeah.
But I love programs like that. But yours sets it apart by having the talkbacks and the information session after each performance, on top of it being just a really solid, brilliant production that we're seeing. I mean,
Oh,
for
thanks,
a
Mark.
class act is still one of the best things I've seen off Broadway. So,
Oh,
I
thank you.
mean,
That makes me so happy. It's that show. I just love that show. And that's the other thing which we're trying to show people is just because people have forgotten about these shows doesn't mean they're bad shows.
no,
There's a lot. I mean, I still think a class act is lovely, and this year I think people are going to see how wonderful Lucky Stiff is, which is makes me really happy. So thank you for those kind words. And I also think it's fun because, like, when you're at Encores, and I was just there for Jelly's Last Jam. Did you get to see it?
I'm
Have you
seeing it on Thursday, and I cannot
seen it on Thursday?
wait.
Oh, it's first of all, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. But that's a big space. It sits what, 2,300 people or something like that,
Yeah,
city
it's
center,
huge.
maybe more. I don't know.
Three
So when
levels.
so when you go, you don't really have a commute. I don't want to say you don't have a communal experience, just because I'm just talking about the sheer like scope and size of the building. But when you go to like our theater or like the York where they do Mufti and stuff like that, the theaters are so intimate that you and the audience sort of become your own community, and you become like it's just fun for me to see like a bunch of fellow nerds geeking out, being like, I remember when I saw Do Re Mi. And I don't know if you get that at Encores just because of the I'm not even gonna say Encores. I don't know if you get that at City Center because the size of the space is so massive. But if you come to us, there's a nice intimacy, and you build up friends, and you leave with like fellow musical theater geeks, which I love.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's you'll hear somebody talking, yeah, a seat behind you saying, "I saw the original," and you'll
I love it.
turn around and you'll start a conversation as opposed to like 50,000 people, and
Yes.
I mean, you want everyone to come see it because but like when you come see like a show, series like J2 Spot, they're there because they love the material. I mean, in Encores, that's true too, but there's celebrities involved, there's other things involved. People come for different reasons, but
Yes.
everyone loves classic musicals and they're there to celebrate it, which is really, and you can feel that in the room.
Thank you for telling us that, because for Jim and I, that's like the most important thing. And I know there's other venues where they do a show and it's like, when will this transfer and how will it transfer and is it going to transfer? And our feeling is that's not what our mission is. Our mission, and that I don't think that's the mission of Encores either. I think it's just something people sort of superimpose on it for all the elements that you just discussed. But for us, it's not. No, we want you to come and listen. You can come and see The Baker's Wife and go, God, that show doesn't work. But at least you got to see it.
Right?
Or you
Yeah,
got, or you
absolutely. I mean,
go,
it's what yours and Encore's like Dear World at Encore's not too long. It's
yes,
like people are like this should transfer. It's like no, it shouldn't. It would do
no, it shouldn't.
horribly. But this
Nope,
is
nobody,
what these series are made for, to see glorious productions of shows that would never work commercially.
no.
And
And that's,
nowadays anyway.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And what I love is like you go, like Jelly's Last Jam, I think is a great example of this. This show, I don't know if like this the one that's on Encore is like, people are like, all around me, like, well, do you think it'll transfer? And I'm like, shh, shh. Just enjoy the fact that this musical from 30 years ago that none of us have seen in 30 years, we're getting to watch again. That's the gift enough. That's
Yeah.
all we need. So everyone's just stopped talking.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. They all come in now. I feel like a lot of people go in with that mentality of, well, is this going to transfer? Like even before the curtain goes up, that's what they're waiting for. And I'm like, no, you're getting to see one of the most brilliant pieces of musical theater from the 1990s. That's the gift.
Yeah.
The fact that it's even on this stage right now for us, that's the gift. That's it. And we do this, and I think we try to do the same thing at J2, which is we're not sitting there being like, and now we're going to invite this producer and we're going to invite that producer. And, is this going to transfer? No, that's not the goal of this. Not the goal of this.
Yeah, and that's one of the if you let go of that, I'm sure it's one of the joys of producing these shows is you don't have to worry about what's next for this production. This is what it is.
It is the best feeling because I saw Jelly's Last Jam and the people behind me, I think were in the industry. I didn't know who they were though. And they were like, well, if they transfer, they're going to have to do this and they're going to have to change that. And I'm like, what? Enjoy the show. Excuse me,
Yeah,
enjoy the show.
it's not what
So
this is about.
that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. This is about us getting a chance to revisit musicals that deserve to be seen again. Sometimes you get surprised. Like I was very surprised by the fact that the book of Jelly's Last Jam is still very topical and still and the storytelling in it is quite brilliant. And the conversation that they were having 30 years ago is a conversation that's still happening today. So for me, I'm like, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. We don't have to worry about if it's going to make money or if can you get this actor to come in to play this role. That's not what this is about.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
it
and
frees you up to choose shows that won't have a life.
yeah, and I think if you come to us over at as well as encores at J2, and that's the other thing which I'm really happy about is like when we came on the scene, Mufti and Encores have been really kind to us, and I think us three organizations all know the same thing, which is like you were talking about at the beginning with podcast. It's niche. It's niche. We're not doing Sound of Music. We're doing Allegro. It's like it's very niche for us. So you have to kind of support each other because you want everybody to help. And I think all three, Encores, Mufti, and us, we're all able to fill in holes that the other companies are not able to.
Mm-hmm.
All three of us, I think, are able to
Absolutely.
help each other. Like, I don't think I think it would be foolish for Encores to do something like A Day in Hollywood, A Night in the Ukraine, because it's a two piano show. Why would you waste a beautiful, gorgeous orchestra on that? And on the flip side, we might never do some big, I don't see us ever doing something like Golden Apple, because I think when you take those beautiful orchestrations away, you don't really have as magnificent as what I mean. So I
Yeah.
think everyone sort of like plugs in and helps each other in their programming and planning, which is really nice. But come to us. I mean, we won't transfer. There's no way to. And I think I think like you said, that gives a producer a sense of freedom.
Yeah. And to do
Now
the
I'm not.
shows as intended.
And also just really quickly, the other thing that we're really proud of is the company was originally started to sort of take the place of Equity Library Theater, which was around in the 80s. Are you familiar with Equity Library
Is
Theater?
that they did Rags? Is that no? I'm thinking of something else. That's a Jewish library.
Oh, that's Jewish library. No, so Equity Library Theater was this theater that was around
Oh.
in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and just about the early 90s. And what it was it was a showcase venue for actors who had just moved to the city, directors who had just moved to the city. Everyone got paid only subway tokens. That's how you got paid.
Huh.
But you always got reviewed by the major publications. And so the New York Times reviewed it. And every single casting director and agent would come and see these shows. And if you go back and you look at the people who were in these shows, you're like, huh? I was talking to someone yesterday and they were like, oh yeah, when I did Equity Library Theater, Beth Level, we did Applause, and Beth Level was the Eve Harrington in Applause, and BD Wong was in the ensemble. And like when you look at the cast list of people, you're like, who did this? Who did this? And so what we're trying to do is also give a platform to new actors. Like, yes, it would be wonderful for us to like be like, okay, we're doing Do Re Mi, and it's going to be Richard Kind and Jackie Hoffman. But there are really wonderful actors who are just as good as Richard and Jackie who don't have the exposure. And so let's put them front and center.
Yeah. And you guys get amazing talent.
We've been We've been very lucky. And Goodbye Girl, which was our last show of the season, was kind of a fluke because it had Santino Fontana and Sierra Boggess and Chris Sieber.
Right.
But that was literally a fluke. They had been working on the show with David for a while. It fit our mission. They were willing to come play with us. So we were like, yeah, let's do it. But we don't actively seek that out. We don't sit there and go, which guy from Newsies could come be Harry Witherspoon for us, Lucky Stiff. Not what we do. There's other
Yeah, I
companies.
mean, you're the lead actor in A Class Act,
Andy Ty.
Ty. He was incredible, and it's somebody I've been following now ever since then.
I'm so happy you liked him. He's such a good guy and he's so talented. And that's the other thing which is kind of nice for us, which is because we don't pay a lot. Everyone who's there is there because they want to be there. No one's there being like, I got to make my health insurance this week. Like they are there because they want to tell these particular stories, and nothing makes Jim and I happier. So yeah. So thanks for the plug, Mark. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
of course. I'm happy to have a venue to plug it. It's one of my favorite institutions.
I can't wait to see you there this year.
Yeah. Oh, Do Re Mi. I saw
Yeah.
that at Musicals Tonight years and years and years ago.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it, so I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked to get to work on it. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's that score. You're like, oh, like every song's a banger.
It's
Every
so
song.
true.
You're like, oh, I can't wait. So I'm very
And
excited.
Lucky Stiff too has an amazing score. At times like this is a classic. I mean,
Times like this, fancy meeting you here. It's so good. The score is so good, and Stephen Lynn's work on it is brilliant, and they've been a joy to work with. And we're so honored that they were like, yeah, it's our 40th, and we would love for you all to bring this show back to celebrate. It's nice. It's just a nice feeling, because I think it means that we're doing good work, and they appreciate that. And so, thanks to them. Thanks
absolutely.
to you.
Well,
Yeah.
so okay, so tell the kids, where can they find your podcasts
Okay.
and your concerts and your productions?
Oh my gosh. Okay, amazing. If you want to listen to the podcasts, you can listen anywhere podcasts are available. We are part of the Broadway Podcast Network. So if you head over there, you might hear some really other wonderful shows as well. But anywhere you listen to your podcast, you can find Broadway Bound. And if you like it, please leave a rating and a review because it helps us immensely. And then in order to find the concerts, you can go to 54below.org. And just look at the calendar. And if you see a bunch of old people who were in dancing 400 years ago, most likely a show that I did. So go ahead and
Amazing.
buy a ticket to that. You'll be in great shape there. If you want to come over to J2 Spotlight NYC, J as in Jim, J2, the number 2, spotlightnyc.com. Go on over, get some tickets. Like I said before, for $196, I believe, you get tickets to 4 shows, which is, I think, the best bargain in town, or the best
Oh,
deal
yeah.
in town, I should say. And then if you want to reach out to me because you're like, hey, I loved the life at Encores. Great. My Instagram is at Rob W. Schneider, just like the SNL actor Rob Schneider. Yes. So
Ooh,
at,
what a proud legacy you're.
I know what a proud, yeah. But hit me up. Hit me up. And I love talking about musical theater. So if you listen to the podcast and you want to geek out about it with someone, hit me up. I'm here. I'd love to geek out.
Amazing. Well, we should definitely get together at some point to geek out and
Yes.
have you on more. And
I would be honored. And when we do Annie 2, Annie Warbucks, I'll be like, hey, listen, I need you. I need your knowledge. And
perfect.
your videos are amazing.
Oh,
They when a new one pops up, it's like literally the best day ever. So thank you so much for doing that and putting in all the work because I know it's not easy, but it always looks incredible. So thank you.
we'll have to collaborate on.
Yes, I would love that. And let's get lunch or dinner soon, just so I can say thank you in person. But thanks so much for having me on today.
Oh,
And
thank you for being here. I again, to my viewers, please go listen to the podcast, see the productions. If you enjoy my content, you're gonna absolutely go bananas for Broadway Bound.
thanks, Mark.
So I can't wait for the next. Yep, I'm gonna listen to the Arthur one now because that's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like one of my top
Too.
5 favorite movies.
Me too. It's genius. It's genius. And I actually think the score is really good. So I hope you like it.
Excellent. I'm so excited.
Yay.
Well, until next time, we'll be in touch.
Yay. Thanks, Mark. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much to Rob Schneider for sitting down with me and letting us all know about the several amazing and vital ways to get more theater history into our veins. Check out the podcast, see the concert if you can, or check out the footage on YouTube after the fact. As I mentioned earlier, all of the links to everything we discussed are in the description below. Also, I edited out almost 20 minutes, I think, of side tangents and whatnot for time, but if you're interested in the full unedited interview, I will be posting it over on Patreon, so head over there to check that out. Links, as always, is in the description. I gotta have that tattooed on me somewhere. Thank you to my wonderful patrons for your constant support. It really, really means the world to me. You can find me on the socials at bwayghostlight if you want to connect and nerd out about some theater history with me there. But until next time, I'm Mark Bonanni. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for watching.